We rarely talk about the quiet unraveling of relationships as years pass by. Many women find themselves waking up one day looking across the table at the man they married and wondering, where did the love go? Why do I feel more resentment than affection? One of the most painful realities women face in long-term relationships is not betrayal, not arguments, but emotional neglect. Emotional neglect doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly in small moments when connection was possible but ignored. It looks like sitting at the dinner table and speaking only to feel unheard. It looks like sharing a worry only to be met with silence or a quick fix rather than true empathy. Over years, this neglect feels less like a crack and more like a canyon. When a husband dismisses his wife's feelings, she begins to stop sharing them. And when she stops sharing, intimacy dries up. The wall isn't built out of stone, it's built out of unspoken sentences, unmet glances, and unreturned touches. For women, love is often felt through presence, through being seen, being heard, and being valued. When that presence fades, women feel invisible inside their own marriages. Emotional neglect makes a woman feel as though her inner world no longer matters. And the irony is, many husbands don't even notice the silence they've created. They think everything is fine while their wives are emotionally starving. Resentment begins here in the quiet, because when you are neglected emotionally, the message you receive is, you are not worth my time, my attention, or my heart. No woman wants to spend decades being unseen. That pain eventually transforms into dislike, not because the love wasn't real, but because the walls became too high to climb. If there is one quiet thief of love in long-term marriages, it is the imbalance of responsibilities. Many women carry the invisible weight of a household, the kind of labor that no one applauds, no one rewards, and yet everyone depends on. It's not just about cooking meals, folding laundry, or remembering birthdays. It's the endless mental checklist of who needs what, when, and how. It's making sure the children's homework is signed, the bills are paid on time, the doctor's appointments are booked, the groceries don't run out, and that every detail of life continues to move without collapsing. When this responsibility is carried disproportionately, women don't just feel tired, they feel alone. They feel like they are parenting both their children and their partner. And over years, this imbalance doesn't just create exhaustion, it creates quiet bitterness. Here's the truth. A woman does not grow to dislike her husband because of a sink full of dirty dishes. She grows to dislike him because those dishes symbolize something deeper. They symbolize that her labor is taken for granted, that her exhaustion is invisible, that her partnership has turned into service rather than shared commitment. Resentment builds silently like dust collecting in the corners of a home. At first it feels small. It's just easier if I do it. But over time, easier becomes expected, and expected becomes unfair. The result is a marriage where one partner feels free and the other feels chained. And here's the cost. When a woman begins to feel that her husband is not her partner but her burden, admiration fades. Love may still exist, but it gets buried under a mountain of fatigue. Dislike takes root, not in the big betrayals, but in the daily inequities that go unacknowledged. When burdens are unequal, the marriage is not balanced. And when the marriage is not balanced, resentment becomes the language women speak silently in their hearts, even if their lips never say a word. One of the most overlooked reasons women begin to dislike their husbands as years pass is the absence of growth. Human beings are not static. We are wired for evolution. We change in our thinking, our values, our dreams, and our understanding of the world. A marriage that once felt vibrant and alive at 25 can feel suffocating at 45 if one partner refuses to grow. For many women, personal growth is not optional, it is survival. They read books, explore new ideas, go to therapy, deepen their spiritual lives, or seek new experiences. They wrestle with their fears, their identities, and their purpose. They keep asking themselves, who am I becoming? What kind of life do I want to live? But when a husband resists that same growth, when he clings to comfort, when he dismisses new perspectives, when he becomes complacent, his wife begins to feel trapped in a cycle of sameness. It's not that she stops loving who he is, it's that she feels abandoned in her own journey of becoming. The danger is subtle. What once felt stable begins to feel stagnant. What once felt safe begins to feel suffocating. Stagnation breeds frustration, and frustration, when left unspoken, hardens into dislike. Because it is difficult to admire someone who refuses to evolve while you are fighting for your own transformation. Growth doesn't always mean dramatic changes. It can be as simple as curiosity, openness, or willingness to evolve alongside your partner. But when that willingness is absent, women feel a gap widening between who they are becoming and who their husbands choose to remain. And here's the unspoken grief. Many women don't just mourn the man their husband has become. They mourn the future they dreamed of sharing with him. They imagine traveling, exploring, building something new together, only to realize they are dragging someone who has no interest in moving forward. That grief often turns into quiet resentment, which over years transforms into dislike. A marriage without growth doesn't stay the same, it decays. Because love is alive, and like anything alive, it must keep evolving to survive. In the early years of marriage, affection often flows freely. Long hugs at the door, kisses before leaving the house, holding hands at the movies, and words of admiration whispered without effort. These small acts of love may seem ordinary, but they are the lifeblood of intimacy. They reassure women that they are cherished, desired, and valued. But as time passes, life gets busy. Work demands grow heavier, children take center stage, bills pile up, and fatigue replaces romance. Slowly, affection begins to fade, not in one dramatic moment, but in tiny increments. The kiss at the door disappears. The hugs grow shorter. The I love you is said out of habit, not passion. What once felt tender becomes routine, and what was once routine eventually becomes absent. For women, this absence is not trivial. Affection is how they measure closeness, how they know they are still emotionally connected to their husbands. When it fades, they don't just miss the touch, they miss the meaning behind the touch. They begin to feel invisible, as though they are no longer worth the effort. Here's the hard truth. Neglecting affection tells a woman, I don't see you anymore. And over years, that message cuts deeper than most realize. A woman who feels emotionally starved begins to close her heart. She may still love her husband, but she no longer feels in love. Resentment begins to take root in the smallest moments. The husband scrolling on his phone instead of reaching for her hand, choosing silence instead of saying, "You look beautiful today," or turning away in bed instead of drawing her close. These moments compound until the absence of affection feels like rejection. And here's where dislike grows, when the home that was meant to be a place of warmth feels colder than the outside world. When a woman feels more valued at work, with friends, or in her own quiet company than she does in her marriage, she begins to emotionally detach. Affection is not a luxury, it is the glue that holds intimacy together. Without it, marriages do not simply survive on loyalty, they wither in silence. Because at the core, women don't just want a husband who provides or protects. They want a husband who still reaches for them, even after decades, to say without words, "You still matter, you are still wanted, you are still loved." Every marriage faces conflict. Arguments, disagreements, and misunderstandings are part of life together. But the difference between a relationship that grows stronger and one that slowly weakens is not the presence of conflict, it's how that conflict is handled. When conflicts are left unresolved, they do not vanish, they linger. They settle deep into the heart like unhealed wounds. Over time, those wounds harden into scar tissue, tough, inflexible, and painful to touch. And eventually, the marriage begins to feel more like a battlefield of unspoken injuries than a partnership of healing. For many women, it is not the fight itself that causes the deepest pain. It is the dismissal afterward. When their concerns are minimized, when apologies never arrive, when reconciliation is rushed or avoided, they learn to stop expecting resolution. But stopping the expectation doesn't mean the hurt disappears. It means the hurt gets buried, and every new conflict adds another layer of scar tissue. Here's what scar tissue does in a relationship. It restricts movement. It makes couples less flexible, less forgiving, less open to connection. A small misunderstanding becomes a trigger for years of stored pain. A simple disagreement suddenly feels enormous because it isn't about the present. It's about everything that was never healed in the past. For women, unresolved conflict often translates to one painful message: my feelings don't matter enough to be resolved. Over time, this message transforms into quiet resentment, then distance, then dislike. Because it's hard to keep loving someone who continuously leaves you bleeding emotionally without offering the balm of repair. Dislike does not usually come from one big argument. It grows from the accumulation of dozens of little battles that were never properly closed. And what's tragic is that many husbands believe they are keeping the peace by avoiding difficult conversations, not realizing that avoidance is the very thing killing intimacy. True resolution requires courage, the courage to sit in discomfort, to own mistakes, to offer real apologies, and to rebuild trust slowly and intentionally. Without this, scar tissue takes over, and what was once a tender heart toward a husband becomes a hardened shield against him. Because here's the truth: love is not destroyed by conflict. Love is destroyed by the refusal to repair. Marriage begins with two people who fall in love with who they are in that moment. But the truth is, none of us stay the same. We evolve, we grow, we shift in our dreams, our desires, our values, and even our sense of self. The woman who married at 25 is not the same woman at 45 or 65. She has lived more, learned more, carried more, and become more. But here's where the fracture begins. Many husbands continue to love the memory of who their wife used to be instead of truly seeing the woman she has become. They expect her to remain the same, carrying the same interests, the same roles, the same energy, while overlooking the fact that she is constantly being shaped by life's seasons. For women, being unseen in their evolving identity is profoundly painful. It feels like being locked in an outdated version of themselves, as if their growth is invisible. When a husband doesn't notice the changes in her, when he doesn't honor her new dreams or acknowledge her transformation, she begins to feel invisible within her own marriage. This invisibility is not about vanity, it is about validation. A woman wants her partner to notice her depth, her resilience, her evolution. She wants to feel that the man she chose is curious about who she is becoming, not only who she was. Without that curiosity, women begin to believe that their husbands are no longer interested in truly knowing them. And here's the tragedy. When a woman feels unseen, she eventually stops showing up. She stops sharing her deepest thoughts, her fears, her longings, because she no longer trusts that they will be heard or valued. And when she withholds those parts of herself, emotional intimacy dies. Over time, dislike begins to take shape, not because she doesn't love her husband, but because she feels that he refuses to meet her where she is now. She dislikes being married to someone who does not see her reality. It feels lonely, like shouting into a void where no echo comes back. The deepest longing in a marriage is to be known, to be seen, understood, and embraced in every version of who we are. When that is missing, women feel as though they are disappearing inside their own homes. And slowly, the love that once brought joy now feels like a prison where they are no longer recognized. Because here's the truth. Being unseen is not the absence of attention. It's the absence of connection. And no marriage can thrive when one partner feels invisible in the very place where they should be most fully known. At the heart of intimacy is not just love, it is vulnerability. To be truly close to some, E1, you must be willing to be seen in your weakness, your fears, your failures, and your deepest truths. Vulnerability is the bridge that turns companionship into intimacy and intimacy into trust. But here's the challenge. Many men are taught from an early age that vulnerability is weakness. They are told to be strong, to tough it out, to never cry, and to keep emotions under control. These messages follow them into adulthood and eventually into marriage. So while women may long for emotional partnership, a place where both can show up fully and honestly, they often find themselves married to someone who hides behind walls of stoicism. For a woman, this absence of shared vulnerability feels like emotional abandonment. She may share her struggles, her fears, her doubts, and her desires, only to meet silence, withdrawal, or even defensiveness. Slowly, she begins to feel as if she is the only one carrying the emotional weight of the marriage. She feels exposed while her partner stays hidden. And nothing makes a woman feel lonelier than being emotionally naked in front of someone who refuses to undress their own heart. Over time, this imbalance breeds frustration. It feels unfair to always be the one initiating hard conversations, the one asking the deep questions, the one opening up first. The absence of vulnerability from her husband communicates, "I don't trust you enough to share who I really am." And that silent message cuts deep. Dislike often begins here, when a woman realizes she is married, but she is still lonely. She has a partner in the legal sense, but not in the emotional sense. And she begins to resent the walls he refuses to break down. The truth is, vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It is the courage to say, "This is who I am, and I trust you enough to see me." Without that courage, a marriage becomes two people living parallel lives instead of an intertwined one. Women don't need their husbands to be perfect, they need them to be real. And here's what many husbands don't understand. Women don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with authenticity. They fall in love with the man who says, "I'm scared too, but I trust you enough to share it." When that partnership and vulnerability is missing, women begin to dislike not just the absence of connection, but the loneliness of loving someone who refuses to truly be known. Because the greatest tragedy is not being rejected for who you are. It is never being allowed to see who your partner truly is. Every person enters marriage carrying dreams. Some are small, like the hope of traveling together or building a cozy home. Some are bigger, like pursuing careers, starting businesses, or leaving a legacy. At the beginning, couples often speak these dreams out loud with excitement, promising each other a future of adventure, growth, and shared fulfillment. But as the years go on, life has a way of crowding out those dreams. Bills, responsibilities, and the demands of raising children can push aspirations to the background. And when sacrifice is required, more often than not, it is the woman's dreams that are asked to wait. For many women, the story sounds familiar. "I'll go back to school later. I'll start that business once the kids are older. I'll take that trip once things settle down." At first, the deferral feels temporary, an act of love and practicality. But when later never comes, deferred dreams turn into buried ones. This burial does not come without cost. Women begin to feel as though their potential was traded for stability, and that the man they married never truly valued or supported what made them feel alive. The unspoken message becomes, your dreams matter less than mine, your desires come second, your calling is negotiable. Over time, that pain transforms into bitterness. Bitterness toward the years lost. Bitterness toward the sacrifices unacknowledged. Bitterness toward the husband who was supposed to be a partner in building a shared future, but who instead became a gatekeeper of limitations. And here's the heartbreaking truth. When a woman begins to see her husband as the reason she never lived fully, admiration disappears. Dislike takes its place, not because she stopped loving him, but because every reminder of her deferred dreams feels like a wound that never healed. Dreams do not simply die when ignored, they haunt. They whisper in the quiet moments, what if? They show up in the lives of others who dared to chase what she was asked to surrender, and eventually they reshape how she sees her marriage. Instead of partnership, she feels confinement. Instead of possibility, she feels regret. The danger is not in sacrifice itself. Sacrifice can be a powerful expression of love. The danger lies in one-sided sacrifice, where a woman gives up everything while her husband continues to pursue his own ambitions without interruption. That imbalance slowly erodes respect, and without respect, marriage cannot thrive. Because here's the truth, women don't need their husbands to make their dreams come true. They need husbands who believe in their dreams, who cheer for them, who help create space for them to flourish. Without that, the marriage becomes a place of clipped wings instead of shared flight. And when wings are clipped for too long, bitterness becomes the only companion. Dislike in marriage doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't come crashing in with one loud moment of betrayal. Instead, it arrives slowly, piece by piece, through emotional neglect, through unequal burdens, through the absence of growth, affection, and vulnerability. It grows in the unresolved conflicts, in the feeling of being unseen, and in the bitterness of dreams left unfulfilled.